First of all, I'm thrilled to meet you here in this PSA autonomous shuttle in our technical center here in Vélizy, and I really very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you about autonomous vehicle. And as a starter, I read while preparing this chat that you were saying that the vehicle will never be 100% autonomous. There will be always a few percentage points left to the human judgment. Could you please elaborate on that? What are the parts of the autonomous vehicle dynamics that will be left under human judgment from your perspective?
I mean, first of all, we need to define what autonomous means, right? So, I mean, one of the issues is that, when people are talking about autonomous vehicle, they are talking about, a lot of different things. If we are talking about the technology today that we define as, 1 to 5, basically, I mean, what I'm saying is that 5 will never exist. This is what I'm saying, right? And it will never exist because the level of attention that is needed by a human when he or she drives is much more than whatever machine one day can achieve, right? So I have some very simple examples for that, that are, just make people understand why I'm saying that. The very first time for French people is easy. It's, just to talk about La Place de l'Étoile at 6 p.m., sure. Right? Place de l'Étoile, 6 p.m. I mean, if you just set an autonomous vehicle there,
it will stop.
It's going to stop. It's not going to advance an inch, right? Because it's going to try to follow the rules. And by definition, when you are at 6 p.m. on the Place de l'Étoile, you don't follow the rules. This is something else. This is sociology. This is,
it's permanent eye contact. Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So you need to negotiate. This
Absolutely.
is a negotiation thing.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that you cannot model one day this negotiation. But the thing is that, there are many, many other examples. I'm going to give you another one that I like very much. Waymo, as you know, recently they released the 11 million miles video that they took, in their autonomous cars, right? So it's on YouTube. You can go, to watch that. And there is a video that I very much like that they released very recently, where you see the car. So this is taken through the windshield, right? So you see the car, moving on the street in Menlo Park or Palo Alto, whatever it is, there. And then in the middle of nowhere, the street, nothing happens. The car stops. And then it starts again for 2 yards, and it stops again, and starts again, and stops. And then you have the feeling that the guy, behind the wheel takes back the control, because the guys behind, they must have been horning like crazy, because, it didn't make any sense. And then you watch the video a little closer, and you look on the sidewalk, and you see two guys walking on the sidewalk, Okay, there is no reason, for the car to stop.
So they were there.
Then you look, a little closer again, and you see that one of the guys walking, he has a stop sign on his shoulder. And of course, the car sees the stop sign and stops, right. and stops. So, there is always a case somewhere that is not us. We don't stop in this case, right? Hopefully, right? But the car is stopping.
And that's fascinating, because when you reach that level of negotiation process when you are driving, Place de l'Étoile is certainly one of the best examples. So you may think about any Indian city, where you always have this eye contact, and everybody knows that you have seen him or her, and vice versa, but everybody tries not to show that you have seen, because you are in a negotiation, I would say, in an intimidation process. It's also very interesting to match this kind of judgment with the fact that in our Western societies, everybody is looking for total safety, and of course, as we know well, 100% does not exist in nature. And the point here is, when you are going to look for this 100%, it will lead to what? It will lead to standstill. Exactly. Nothing moves. As you said, in La Étoile, in Place de l'Étoile, if you want 100% certainty, then nothing moves, and you stay there, which then impacts the freedom of mobility. So how do we balance this fact that everybody would like to have 100% safety, from the other side, some dynamics in the mobility are very much a negotiation process, so there is no absolute certainty. How will we balance this in terms of talking to the society, to the citizens, to the consumers, saying, sorry, 100% safety does not exist, but this certainly will be better than any other human behavior. But how do we talk to them on this matter?
It's not easy, but like every other tool, they need to be accepted, right? So somehow, somewhere, we need to explain. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, all the technologies, whatever it is, all the tools, whatever they are, I mean, we need to educate. So if people are educated, they are going to understand that, I mean, first of all, zero risk doesn't exist. I mean, I mean, the society pretty much knows that somewhere. But I mean, still people are believing that the ideal robot, you know, is going to do everything right.
Fix everything.
So, which is false. I mean, there will be accidents. Of course, there will be accidents. I mean, with tools, there are accidents. You know, if you take a hammer, you are going, you know, to crush your finger at one point.
Sure.
So there will be accidents. So the society kind of knows it, but in this particular one, where the Hollywood basically, you know, explained that the robots are going to be just those incredible beings that can do everything right. So people somewhere, you know, they believe that. So we need to bring back, you know, the people to the reality, to explain the reality, to educate those people, to tell them, look, I mean, a car, an autonomous car, level 4 will be great. Will be much better than any human, you know, drinking, you know, some alcohol or texting while driving and doing all that, because it's going to be focused on the task and it's going to be much, much better than us. And most likely, you know, if we have 3,000 people that are dying today in France, you know, on the road of France every year, I mean, most likely we can, you know, have 90% of those things that are going to be avoided, you know, thanks to the technology. But for that, we need to still understand that there will be some other accidents, other kinds of accidents, and there will be accidents for sure. And we cannot accept, you know, 0.0006 or whatever it is, you know, which is basically zero.
So it has to be we have to explain the benefit in relative terms and not try to position it against absolute 100%.
Exactly. Absolute, I mean, absolute.
So that means also training and somewhere explanations to the consumer on what we are trying to do, which is to improve what exists by a significant breakthrough, but it's not 100% at the end of the day.
Yeah, and one thing that is, you know, on your lap is actually to explain to the people, you know, how your algorithms are working. Of course, you know, some people are going to ask, I mean, in your case, when you are going to build those cars, you know, what choice are you going to make? What are the algorithms that you are programming you are going to do when they are in front of a difficult situation, right? So the question is going to be from, you know, the people, I mean, if I'm in your car, am I going to be safer than, you know, grandma that is going to cross the thing in front of my car? Are you going to kill grandma, or are you going to kill me? So that's an ethical thing that it's on your lap. And I mean, I don't think, and maybe you have an answer, but it's a very, very difficult answer to give, right? So.
Indeed, ethical decisions are the most difficult one because, of course, again, there is no reference case, which brings us back to validation of the technology that we are putting in that autonomous shuttle. At the end of the day, when there is a problem, and we have seen this recently, citizens look at their governments and their administration and say, oh, look, what do you do about this? Is there any regulation, any norm against which you can check that those companies have made the appropriate validation? And I think that's fine. It gives a reference case. As long as the governments and the administrations are able to define what is the reference case, including the ethical decisions that you were mentioning. And I don't think there is any government in the world that is ready to express what the validation means, and beyond that, to express what would be their decision in terms of ethics. If you have to choose between this and that, and many human beings may have a different opinion about what decision you would make in that kind of circumstance.
Depends on where in the world, depends on a lot of things, your personal ethic and so on.
And this is, I think, extremely interesting for our society, because at the end of the day, it brings everything back to us. I mean, we start by saying we want more technology to have less risks on the road or whatever, and then the companies start to work on the technology. At the end of the day, we say, okay, now we have the technology. Is it 100%? And 1% does not exist, but it's better than. Okay, it's better than. Then how do you demonstrate that it's better than? Exactly. But if I don't trust you, the corporation, I have to ask my government. But then the government doesn't know how to make the validation or even to make ethical decisions that would be supported by the societies in which you operate, which brings us back to us. Would you support this ethical decision here or there? It's a closed loop at the end of the day. It's quite interesting.
I mean, and you know, as we said earlier also, I mean, it depends. I mean, it's the truth for every single technology. So for instance, you know, when you are talking about GDPR, right? GDPR, it was just last year, right? 2018, but really the issues that are GDPR related, I mean, they started back, early in the 2000s, right? So this is when, Facebook started to be, prevalent and so on. So, I mean, it took 15 years basically for the regulator or the government or whatever it is to take the decision and to make the decision and to impose something. And this is the issue is innovation against regulation, right? Regulation is always late. And you cannot ask the governments, to be aware of what is happening and to know exactly what is happening with the technology, because they are not in the technology at the time where it's starting, right? So that's why this 15 years of gray area, I mean, this is where you and the people that are creating the technologies, they have to work with the government to educate them as well. And the government, by the regulation, will then educate the population. But for sure, I mean, all that, it's at the very beginning, it's a very short closed loop.
It's short closed loop, yeah. And it's interesting because you see, we are at the moment in our societies where many people do not always trust the big corporations. But here we are talking together about if the big corporations are not involved in creating the most reasonable and the most robust regulations, then we cannot offer to our citizens something that would be reasonably okay with their expectations, which means at the end of the day, the level of trust in the society, regardless of which organization you belong to, needs to increase if we want to move the humanity forward in this matter. And I think that's also one of the challenges we have.
Exactly. If I can rebound on that, I mean, when we talk about AI, because I mean, autonomous vehicle is about AI, right? So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're always talking about those black boxes, right? And the explainability of the thing. So if we're able, as a science now, to explain a little bit more what is inside the box, it will help you, the industry, to push to the people the explanation of what is happening in the box. And then the level of trust that you're talking about most likely will increase. But again, it's a problem of education.
Absolutely. And we are back to the basics. We are back to education and how do we want to collaborate in our societies to make humankind a better direction. In terms of freedom of mobility, we were talking about the fact that if we look for 100% safety, we may end up by never going through Place de l'Étoile because there is no reason to go through because it's a negotiation process. How do you see the cost of all of those technologies to prevent the fact that we end up with a highly technological dense products that are only affordable for a few, and at the end of the day, individual mobility may be damaged by the fact that many people will not be able to afford that kind of mobility. I know that the volume scale effect will help. All of this is okay. We have seen it in the past. But here we are talking about something else. I mean, an autonomous vehicle, we have concluded that beyond level 3, there is no more connection between the cost and the customer value, which means there is no more business case that could be built. Hence, the companies may not eventually develop that. We believe there is one for level 4, eventually level 5, even though you were saying that it will never exist for shuttles and robotaxis. And there we see a business model. But of course, we are assuming that those products, those mobility devices will be so expensive that their cost will be shared among the community and not by one single individual. So how do we make sure, perhaps that's not what we should be looking at, the fact that autonomous vehicles do not become a luxury good for a very limited number of customers, from your perspective?
So I mean, the reality is like every new technology could be color television, or I mean, you can take any of them. At the beginning, it's always a luxury item, always. So for a while, I cannot define the why, but for a while it will be. The reality is, and what is very interesting, in this particular domain of the autonomous vehicle and this economy that we are actually creating a new kind of economy. This is a shared economy that we are talking about.
Sure.
I mean, the reality today is that my car, your car, most likely, is staying, 95% in the garage, right,
sure.
or not being driven. 95% is a lot of time. So today, I mean, we were told, by the people, for 100 years that we needed to own a car, right? So now, I mean, we are going to understand that we don't need to own a car anymore. We need to own mobility.
Yeah.
So if we succeed already to have we won't go to 100%, but if we succeed to go to maybe 80% of utilization, of those cars, already, the share cost is going to be divided by a lot, right?
Sure.
So the price by itself, by definition, will also go down because of that.
The price per user and per mile is going to go down.
So, and I'm sure that we are going to invent new mobilities, new business cases that we don't have today because we still don't understand exactly what all we can do with all those things. And just to make a point about the level 5 again, I'm not saying that level 5 won't exist in closed environment. So when we are talking about robotaxi or something, that
simplify the environment.
Yeah, very simplified thing, on freeways and stuff like that. For sure, because the smart cities, if one day they exist, they will also allow, those things to be driven, on those things. But I call that train. I don't call that, a car, because the train is basically, the tracks. Sure. This is what it is. So level 5 is the definition of the train.
It's very funny because while we are discussing all of this, we are in this PSA autonomous shuttle going in circles inside of our technical center. It's a very interesting to see that somebody opened the door of a car that was parked nearby, and automatically we stop very, very quickly. Well, this is really exciting, and so you have been working in this industry for 35 years right now. I think that this is an exciting period of breakthroughs and changes and challenges, and that also opens a lot of opportunities for companies like ours. It's not only about threats or being pushed in the back. That's okay. We are here to be agile, and we want to be very agile. At the same time, we are a very ethical company. We care about people, and we want to make things right. And I see that when we get close to ethics, then a corporation like ourselves cannot be alone. It has to be something that is driven by the society, being safety, being difficult decisions. If one accident is going to happen, and what do you do at that point in time? All of this needs better collaboration between the car companies and the administrations. One of the challenges that we have in our region of the world is that we must have more trust among the different stakeholders, and I think that we are low right now in Europe. We are very, very low in trust among different stakeholders to discuss about those matters. Hopefully it will change, and hopefully the new generations will help us change this, because if we don't open up our minds, then all of this is going to be full of bumps and stop and goes. And
I totally agree. The trust that you are talking about is very, very important, but everybody needs to collaborate. So it means, not only the people need to be more educated, as we said. We need to be more open. You need to be more open. That's all true. But also, we are not helped right now by the media. I'm not going to say, that media are bad. But the fact that, when there is an accident, for instance, so far there have been 3 or 4 accidents that have been, blown up, basically, in the domain of autonomous cars. Yes, there were people who died. That's for sure. This is the accidents that I was talking about before. There will be accidents. So there were accidents already, and there will be accidents. But we need to realize also how many lives were saved thanks to those cars that are, even 1, 2, 3 level right now.
Sure.
People who are driving Teslas today, I'm sure they did, avoid a lot of accidents already. But we don't know that because it's not, being popularized or in the media. So in the media, we only see the bad part of the technology. So we need, us scientists, and people who are using those technologies, we need to educate again. I'm repeating that all the time, but this is fundamental for the trust that you're talking about.
Which basically means we need to fight against superficiality. We need to bring back common sense and thoughtful thinking that is not only superficial. I think that's one of the challenges of our societies. I completely agree with you. Thank you. It was great to discuss with you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.